Public, good evening. Welcome to those that are on YouTube. Welcome to the Planning Applications Committee for the 10th of February. Firstly, can we have the fire instructions, please?
Thank you, Chairman. There will be no fire drill tonight. The fire alarm is a loud continuous ring. If the fire alarm rings, please leave the building promptly and calmly using the stairs next to the lift if possible. The fire escape in the council chamber should only be used as a last resort. Do not stop to gather personal belongings and do not use the lift. The evacuation point is at street level in the Knoll Road car park, and the assembly point is indicated by a green sign. Do not leave the assembly point until you are told it is safe to do so. And lastly, if you have reduced mobility and the fire alarm rings, please make yourself known to myself.
Thank you very much. Apologies.
Thank you, Chairman. I've received no apologies.
Right, I actually thought that we did have one, but we'll pick that up as we go through. I'm not sure. Okay, can we, members, are you agreeable that I sign the minutes of the last meeting which was circulated under a separate cover? Thank you. Thank you, members. Declarations we'll deal with on each item. And we have a change of order. I will try and take you through each item as we come to it, as well as I can work it out myself, actually. But the first item is, in fact, is page 205 on your agenda, which is 39 Commonfields West End. Now, declarations on that one. Councillor Alloway.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I am the set applicant for 211302 application.
Thank you. So you will absent yourself from the meeting, and if you go to the members' room, I'm sure we'll make arrangements for you to be called back to the meeting as appropriate. Bearing in mind, Councillor Alloway, I will do a group declaration for the rest of us as is a fellow councillor. Are there any other declarations? Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, Councillor Alloway is a member of the community group, and as such, I'm his leader, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Any other declarations to make other than that? No. Mrs. Bishop, please. Thank you.
This application comes to the committee as Councillor Alloway has advised, as he is a councillor of this council and he is also a member of this committee. This relates to his private property at 39 Commonfields, and the proposal before us this evening is to erect an extension to the house. Now, these are the existing elevations. This is the front. This is looking at the rear of the property, and these are two views, so you can see the house here, and this is the relationship to the adjoining property here at 37. The proposal before us this evening is to demolish the existing garage in this location, reconfigure the existing rear portion here, and to erect a single-storey side and rear extension with a new roof for this part of the building. These are the existing elevations, so you can see the front here, then this is the side, this is the rear, and obviously just note that we have this kind of glazed roof here, and this is the side elevation. The proposed elevations, as you will see, we have the side extension here, we have the change to the roof design in this location, and obviously the infilling with brick. And across the rear elevation, we have a more formal brick and roof construction rather than the glazed, and this is the extension that we are looking at considering this evening. This is the side elevation that would be adjacent to 37. As an update to the report, no further representations have been received, and the recommendation is to grant, subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions at all on this item? If not, there's a recommendation from the officers. Is there a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Perry, seconder please. Councillor Betton, all those in agreement? I'll take that as unanimous. Thank you very much, members. Cliff, Robin, can one of you ask Graham to come back in? Thank you. Thank you very much. One other item for noting, members, is that the application regarding St Margaret's Cottage, Woodlands Lane, Windlesham, has been withdrawn at the request of the applicant as contained in the update. So we now go to the application, if I've got this right, Burnside Nursery, Philpott Lane, page 163 in your agenda. Are there any declarations on this item? Councillor Wheeler.
I have had conversations with neighbours in relation to this application, but obviously it hasn't influenced any decision that I might make.
Thank you. Anybody else? No, thank you very much. Mrs. Pearman, thank you.
This application has been called into committee by Councillor Tedder, who initially had concerns about the impact on the Greenbelt and flooding. Councillor Tedder has since confirmed to officers that she is now satisfied with the recommendation to grant. There are some updates to this report. The first update is just to add clarification about inappropriate and appropriate development in the Greenbelt, and the fact that we consider this equestrian development replacing the glass houses to be appropriate, and as such, it does not rely on very special circumstances. Slight amendments to conditions 3 and 6 are also proposed, and an additional condition to ensure that any demolition materials are not used to raise land levels on the site, which could lead to flooding issues. The application seeks the replacement of the existing dwelling on site with another residential dwelling of a slightly larger size, and the replacement of existing glass houses to the rear of the site with private equestrian facilities and an area for exercising horses. The equestrian facilities would be for the use of the owners of the property only and not a commercial facility. The residential dwelling also has an agricultural occupancy condition which is proposed to be removed. A previous application on this site was refused in 2020, which was for removal of the agricultural occupancy tie only. Although no further marketing details have been provided to support this application, the application before the committee now proposes the redevelopment of the site as well as the removal of the agricultural occupancy tie. This application is proposed for permission as officers consider that compared to the existing built form, the proposed built form has a beneficial impact on the green belt, and there are character and visual benefits from replacing the dilapidated glass houses. As such, the loss of the agricultural occupancy condition has to be weighed up in the planning balance along with the benefits of the proposal. This slide shows the location of the site. It's located on Philpott Lane, immediately south of the Mill Bourne, which runs along the northeastern boundary of the site. The site lies outside the settlement area of Chobham and within the Green Belt. The site is largely within flood zone 3, so has a high chance of flooding. The development within the site is concentrated to the western side, and upon entering the site from the access road, the dwelling would be the first building you come to, which has a residential curtilage and tennis court, and then further south are some dilapidated glasshouse bases, and then the glass houses further on in the southwest corner. These photos show the existing glass houses inside and out. There's some more photos of the glass houses and some of the bases which are still remaining. This photo shows the existing dwelling to the front and the rear and some of the residential curtilage. These slides show the open area of the site, which is adjacent to the residential dwelling and the glass houses and runs up to the Mill Bourne. This is the existing access road within the site. Both of those photos are looking north towards the access from Philpott Lane. And this shows the current access from Philpott Lane. The photo on the right is looking kind of north from the access. This slide shows the proposed development. The new dwelling would be approximately in the same place as the existing dwelling, with a slightly larger footprint. The size increase of the dwelling would be about 38% in floor space terms, which is considered on balance to be acceptable. The design of the existing and proposed dwellings is similar, and visually the new dwelling does not appear significantly larger. Although there would be a slight height increase, this is to allow the finished floor levels to be raised due to flooding issues, which was a condition required by the Environment Agency. The existing glass houses to the south of the site would be replaced by the L-shaped stable block and vehicle and hay stores along the southern boundary. Overall, the hard standing across the site would be reduced and replaced with soft landscaping, and some of the new hard standing would be porous, which is an improvement in terms of surface water drainage. The tennis court would be removed and be replaced with a menage of similar size for horse exercising. This slide shows the existing dwelling elevations on the left and the proposed dwelling on the right. As you can see, the design is not dissimilar. This slide shows the proposed floor plan and elevation of the stables. They would comprise 3 rooms for stables, 1 birthing room, a tack room, a feed and storage room, and then a kitchen, restroom, WC and shower. There will be no residential sleeping accommodation in the stables. The applicant has stated that the kitchen and shower are required to keep the residential and equestrian facilities separate to allow the residential property to be kept clean, and also in case the owners were away and other people were brought in to look after their horses, so they could do this without access to the residential property. A condition is proposed to ensure that the stables cannot be converted to any other use without planning permission. The size of the stables has been assessed by Reading Agricultural Consultants on behalf of Surrey Heath as being appropriate in size for the use as proposed, to house 4 horses, and the size of the adjoining land has also been assessed as appropriate. The vehicle and hay stores are proposed to house machinery largely associated with the equestrian use of the site, including a tractor-type vehicle with attachment, or horse, lorry and trailer and hay storage. The consultants again have advised that this building is appropriate in use and size, as the storage of machinery when left out can lead to deterioration and rusting of moving parts, as well as being a risk for theft. Originally, the design of the building was proposed to be open-fronted, which allowed the flow of air over the hay. However, doors and a security barrier have been included now following the advice of the agricultural consultants regarding theft, although there's ventilation grills and vent tiles to allow airflow still. This shows the difference between the existing and proposed hard standing. Existing is on the left and proposed on the right. So the grey areas on the plan are hard standing, the orange is gravel, and the yellow are buildings. The pink area on the proposed plan is the horse exercising area, which would be porous with a sand and stone base. It's therefore considered that overall the replacement of the glass houses with the equestrian development, which is also appropriate development, will benefit openness due to the reduction in the size of the development, as well as having character and visual benefits. The benefits of the proposal overall are considered to outweigh the harm of the loss of the agricultural occupancy condition, and the consultants have also confirmed it's unlikely that there will be a need for such a dwelling in this location. The surface water flood risk is also likely to improve as a result of the development. It's therefore recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Members. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the additional clause with relation to the removal of spoil, essentially. I would just, if possible, like that to be strengthened slightly, because it refers only to the dwelling and not to the additional buildings and stables, etc., that are going onto the site. So if we could please amend to say facilities disposal as soon as practical of any, basically, of it, and also confirmation that where they're taking up the hard standing, that hard standing will also be removed so that we do get the net gain in terms of drainage. I'll leave the officers to come up with the appropriate wording around that, if at all possible, but I think we need to make sure that it covers everything and not just the proposed dwelling. Thank you.
So can I just clarify, this is in relation to the new condition 6 contained in the update, and you're saying that alteration of site level. Can you just run through that again, please? Just I've got it in front of me.
Yeah, I can. So the no alteration to site levels, and in terms of all materials, if we can just strengthen a little bit so that it relates to, because they part of the sort of net gain, if you like, is the fact that they are removing some of the hard standing associated with the glass houses, and that's part of the reason, you know, that we're seeing it as an acceptable alternative. And so it's a question of basically all of that coming off site, not just anything associated with the dwelling.
But it already proposed says, I'm not, that with any part of the application site following proposed demolition, are you saying proposed demolition and clearance of hard standing?
If that's how we need to phrase it in order to ensure it.
That's fine.
Yes, that's fine. So we insert those, including the hard standing in there. Yeah, thank you for that. So Councillor White.
I may have misread something or misheard you, I'm not too sure. You just said that the extra facilities in the stable so that people don't have to go out to the house when other people are looking after their horses. Does that indicate then that it's going to be a commercial venture? I thought it said somewhere in the papers that it couldn't be for commercial use.
No, I think it's only if the owner was away, like on holiday, and they needed somebody to come in and just kind of watch the horses, feed the horses when they're away. It's definitely not commercial. It's private, yeah.
Councillor Wheeler.
Just picking up on that, obviously there is no residential permissions within it. And so maybe we should say that there should be no overnight sleeping of any sort within. I don't know if we need to specify it any more clearly. I have to say I'm slightly surprised that they want showers and lavatories when it's all needs to be associated with the residential property. There's lots of liveries without those facilities that exist. I just think we need to, I don't know if we can strengthen that in any way.
The showers, as I understand it, are in the new stable block. So it's not unreasonable. I mean, I'm not one that's mucked out horses. I've done cows. And you severely need a shower after having dealt with cows, trust me. So I'm not sure whether, you know, there is any difference between having a shower block. Mr. Partington, do you want to comment?
Yeah. I think in terms of putting about overnight accommodation, in practice, when you're imposing a condition, you've got to make sure that's enforceable. And the reality is, checking on overnight stay is going to be quite difficult in any event. But I think condition 3 is probably providing that sufficient weight in any event.
Councillor Mansfield.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, mine was the same point, really. It's, so I'm just referring to what the officer has just stated about the condition being there, because I'm just concerned also that it could become a long-term opportunity for the future. But if you, can you just refer to me to the point where Mr. Partington you just referred to, please?
With respect to the enforceability of having overnight stays out, it's condition 3 on page 177, which also already refers to the stables and storage building only being incidental to the use of the residential property.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got that.
And the update
Thank
as
you.
well. I apologise, I haven't got the update in front of me. Thank you.
Councillor Allaway.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, would that restriction for any residential or overnight stays apply to any temporary provisions on that site, as opposed to only conversion of the stables?
The conditions proposed just refers to, sorry, the stables and storage building not being used for any residential purpose or any other purpose other than it's proposed for. I mean, if something was erected temporarily on the site, that would either have to be permitted development or they'd have to put an application for that anyway. They're not proposing anything temporary as part of this.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. It's a bit of clarification, really. I probably don't understand, but I always thought that the agricultural tie was to provide affordable housing for agricultural workers. If we remove the tie, is that going to upset our quotas of affordable housing in the area?
No, I mean, the agricultural occupancy condition, it's not kind of counted as affordable, and we've had our agricultural consultants look at this, and they think, I mean, there's a few reasons why it's not likely to be, you know, needed or affordable for an agricultural worker, and it's partly it's been extended. So even if you apply a discount for the tie, it's still likely to be out of reach of an agricultural worker. There needs to be significant investment in the nursery type buildings because they're very dilapidated. The services need a complete overhaul. So while we don't really have sufficient marketing information, and we acknowledge that, there are several reasons why our consultants think it's really unlikely that an agricultural worker would be able to afford it, even with that discount.
Councillor Betton.
Thank you, Chairman. I've never mucked out cows, but I have mucked out horses. I've slept with horses in the go shut your eyes sense.
All right, you carry on.
And you have to do that sometimes when they're not well. They need looking after 24 hours a day. You sometimes get vets in or nurses in, and they sleep there as well. When you're grooming, you get hot and sweaty. Horses do have an odour. The fact that you've got a shower in the block is a very good idea. And I think that people are worried about stuff that they didn't ought to be worried about.
Thank you for that. I was wondering where you were, that was leading us to, but Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to condition 3, it says obviously the stables and building should be used for equestrian purposes, and the equestrian use should be incidental to the use of the residential property only and shall not involve any commercial use. That said, within that condition, I could potentially argue that there is a need for residential occupancy and that it is still within the fact that it's my... So, for example, I could say that my son, daughter, loved one, great-aunt Matilda were primarily living with me but just happened to be sleeping in the stables. So I wondered if we could say that shall not involve any commercial use or residential occupancy. And that completely strengthens that. Thank you.
Yep, okay, we can do that. So there's no residential occupancy on condition 3. Any other comments or questions, councillors? No. We have an officer recommendation, but there's a couple of amendments, one to condition 3 and the other two conditions 6. Bearing those in mind, is there a proposer and a seconder for the recommendation to grant? Councillor Betton, Councillor Mansfield, all those in agreement? Sorry, Councillor Barnett, are you in agreement or are you voting? You're in agreement. Thank you for that. That, I think, members, is carried. Councillor Black, were you, sorry, did I see you voting? Thank you. Yeah, that's carried unanimous. Thank you very much indeed, members. Do you want to go now, or are you? Fine. Okay, thank you, members. Now moving on to, and as I just confirmed that the St Margaret's application is withdrawn, so we're now moving on to the application on page 3 of your agendas, which is Heath Park Wood, Windlesham. On declarations, I will make one that I and assume all other members have received correspondence from a number of parties in respect of this item. Yes, Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. I have had numerous conversations with residents, with the Windlesham Society, and I think from memory a very long time ago with the applicant as well.
Thank you. Any other declarations? Councillor Mansfield?
Yeah, I just agree with the fact that I've also had a huge amount of emails concerning this particular development, but I haven't actually corresponded, returned any emails or had any conversations with any of the applicants. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Betton. Sorry, Barnett. Sorry, and Councillor Betton. Right. I think then that we've covered everything on that one. And Mrs. Bishop, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. To begin with, I thought it would be helpful to provide some background to this application. It is a well-established housing reserve site. It has been so since the Surrey Heath local plan in 2000. On the 26th of July 2017, outline planning permission was allowed on appeal for up to 140 dwellings with community facilities, associated landscaping, open space, car parking and access from Woodlands Lane, and also the use of the land to provide publicly accessible recreation space, the same. Means of access was approved with all other matters, that is appearance, landscaping, layout and scale, reserved for subsequent determination. This is condition 1 on the appeal decision, and you will find that in your agenda on page 74. An application for reserved matters is not an application for planning permission. Reserved matters are the detailed matters following the grant of an outline planning permission. What this means is that you are not looking at the principle of development, the acceptability of the development for residential purposes or for SANG. That has been set by the inspector. The outline permission is subject to 32 conditions, many of which require the submission of details prior to the commencement of development. This does not mean it has to be submitted at the reserved matter stage. What it does mean is it has to be submitted prior to the commencement of development. The outline permission is subject to a Section 106 agreement which secures the SANG, including its maintenance and management, and 40% affordable housing for this development. A unilateral undertaking is also in place which secures a financial contribution towards primary education. By way, you'll note from the committee report, the inspector did not accept that the contribution was justified for first years or secondary education. This application, which is valid from the 19th of May 2020, is the reserved matter submission pursuant to conditions 1 and 2, which relate to the submission of reserved matters within 3 years of the date of the outline permission. It does not mean the council has to determine it. The requirement is that they are submitted. The application also includes details submitted pursuant to a number of conditions on the outline permission. So you have the principal, which is the reserve matters, which are the 4 outstanding matters from the outline permission. And at the same time, the applicant has supplied a number of conditions. There are still a number outstanding, which are pre-commencement, and they will be submitted in due course. And this is the site that we are discussing. Now, the land to the north of Woodlands Lane is part of the housing reserve site. And I would say it is just part because the actual housing reserve site is much bigger. It is not greenbelt land, it is countryside beyond and is designated as such. Just for members' information, this is where St Margaret's is, which is the application that has been withdrawn. Now, the area of land to the north of Woodlands Lane comprises 3 basic areas. Up here you will have a retained woodland. In this area here you will have ecological retention and management, and the main residential development will be in this area here. The Sangland is to the south of Woodlands Lane, and this is within the Greenbelt. The principles of how these areas would be developed was established by the outline permission. Now, just to put some context in terms of what the site looks like, these are views of Woodlands Lane, looking east and west. The site is up here. Then we have views within the site of north of Woodlands Lane. So this is standing in the woodland as it stands at the moment. This is looking towards properties in Heath Park Drive. There will be a 10-metre buffer retained to the Heath Park Wood boundary and to the boundary with St Margaret's and Oakwood. Again, this is looking towards Heath Park Drive. This is looking towards the boundary with Oakwood, which actually fronts onto Chertsey Road. This is looking towards St Margaret's and Kilterbride, also known as the Ferns. And this is on the land to the south of Woodlands Lane. This is the area that is going to become the Sang. So this is the bit pardon me. This is the area to the south. This is the area by the M3. This is looking down towards, this is with your back towards Woodlands Lane and looking down the site towards Thorndown Lane. The M3 is over here. Better sense of the M3 here. As you will see, the existing land in this location is field. The trees that you see are within the boundary of the M3. And again, these are just views from within the site of the open space. So this is actually looking north, up from the southern end of the proposed Sang. Now, the scheme that we are looking at this evening is for 116 dwellings. It comprises 54 two-bedroom, 54 three-bedroom, and 8 four-bedroom dwellings. It also includes a community facility. When the housing reserve site was designated, there was no requirement for this facility to be provided, but it is part of the development proposal before us this evening. There is local equipped area of play and a local area of play in this location. This is the ecological area that is to be transferred to the Save Me Trust, together with the retained woodlands up here and to the boundaries. As you will see, we have the community centre at the front of the site, then the road comes in and he loops round and you come back. You have footpath access through the site so that you can walk around it as a circular walk in addition to the Sang. This is the proposed layout for the Sang. As you will see, there is extensive tree planting. We have got new tree planting along the bund in this location. We have got pockets of new tree planting throughout the site. This gives a sense of the kind of housing that we're looking at, it has two character areas. The woodland edge, which as you can see has is characterised by tiles and cladding, and again is a transition. Then we have the Windlesham Heart, which is more to the east side of the site, so by the play space. And these are just examples of street scenes within the site. So this is at the beginning, and this is just working our way through. So you will see that space is retained around the built form. It is 2-storey in height. The parking requirement in terms of the Windlesham neighbourhood plan of 2 spaces for 2, 3 spaces for 3, and 4 spaces for 4 are all complied with in a combination of parking spaces, single garages and double garages. Again, you will see that we have detailing and articulation to all built form. Again, just going through, the main access through the site will be tree lined in accordance with current government policy. And again, it just shows that you have variation, you have articulation, and the reserve matters are for scale, appearance and layout. And again, you can see that we have spacing, the buildings relate well to each other, and just go through again where you have spacing again and good design. And at the front of the site you have the community building. So this is just as you enter. So this is these buildings are on the right as you enter into the site. So let's go back. There is an update to the application, which is on your update sheet. You will see that the applicant has agreed to update the surveys for the LEM. And they have withdrawn this condition from this submission. As a consequence of this, condition 19, informative 19 is also withdrawn. A further submission will be required in this regard. The applicant has agreed to all the requested changes by the Council's Arboricultural Officer, and we have received further correspondence from Surrey Wildlife Trust. They have looked at the comments made by the inspector in grounds on terms of biodiversity, and on that basis they have no further comment to make in that regard. They've also looked again at the lighting, and their comment having regard to what is being proposed with lighting for the roads particularly, but not primarily around the woodland edge. If I can just go back to the layout. The lighting layout basically follows the line of the road, and you will have some offshoots in this location and in this location and through. But these properties, with the exception of this area here, will be dark. So in terms of how we're dealing with the bats, you'll see from the report that we've removed the right to for external lighting without permission throughout the estate. We have also said, we've also recommended that the lights are switched off in accordance between the hours of 1 and 5, because that ties in with Surrey, again, to create a dark environment. The woodland areas themselves will remain dark, as will the Sang. And on that basis, Surrey Wildlife Trust have no further comment to make. There is a correction to condition 1 in terms of a revision. We have had a further letter of representation which raises objection to the proposal on grounds of loss of woodland, impact on wildlife, air pollution associated with additional cars, traffic problems and impact on local infrastructure. All of those matters were established as a matter of principle by the outline. There is also a verbal update I would like to give to the meeting in respect of condition 4. the applicant has come back and requested that the condition be amended so that the trigger is the 60th dwelling. The reason for this is that they will be doing construction in this area for a while, and they are concerned about the potential conflict between children playing here and their construction vehicles. Before the development is occupied, the SANG has to be provided. So in those circumstances, as a balance in terms of recreational space being available to residents, it is recommended that the condition be amended to read the 60th dwelling. The recommendation, therefore, is amended, and it is to grant, subject to a legal agreement to secure the maintenance and management of the public open space, the ecological mitigation and retained woodland areas in perpetuity. Sorry. Which bit would you like me to repeat? About the recommendation? Right. The amended recommendation is to grant, subject to a legal agreement, to secure the maintenance and management of the public open space, the ecological mitigation and retained woodland areas in perpetuity, and the following conditions as amended by this update sheet and the verbal update. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Mrs. Bishop. Very comprehensive, as always. We have 3 public speakers, and I can't see 2 of them at this stage, but we have Mr. MacDonald and Mrs. Holt, who will be sharing a laptop, but I think it's Mr. MacDonald to go first.
Good evening, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much. And I can see you, Mr. MacDonald. It's just I couldn't read your name down the bottom. But you have 4 minutes. You'll be advised when there's 1 minute left. And the time will start whenever you're ready, Mr. MacDonald.
Thank you. We welcome this chance to speak, and I shall try to answer any questions. We hope you've been able to read our advance notice of legal advice that you cannot deal with this application. The design of this project has already taken about 6 years and has not yet ended. Correspondingly, the processing of this detailed application has, allowing for the pandemic, taken about 55 weeks so far, with more to come, contrasting with the maximum of 26 weeks stipulated by the National Planning Guarantee. Our belief is that this reflects the inherent unsustainability of this project, which of course this very committee made clear in its 4 reasons for rightly refusing the outline application in March 2016. The unsustainability has become even worse because of the climate emergency, increasing the biodiversity value of the Scots pine trees themselves, and the clear movement of a heavily protected species of bird onto the proposed building site. On our most important legal point in our letter, we accept that it is firstly for you, the committee, not us nor the case officer, to judge whether the amended scheme of 29th of June last is significantly different from the original proposal. However, our legal advice is that this judgment must be a reasonable one by you, based on the information available, and that critically, if significantly different, the amended scheme is indeed out of time. We are not quibbling about the difference of 4 dwellings between the schemes. That could be simply an arithmetical error. We are just using the different numbers of 120 and 116 as labels to distinguish between the 2 schemes. But having regard to the information we have emphasized in our letter, that is, important design changes in 5 separate respects specified by the Urban Design Advisor, the turnover of more than 105 documents since the original application, and the fresh consultation exercise, we submit that no planning authority could reasonably conclude that the 29th of June amendments, which are the ones being reported to you now, were insignificant. The most telling factor could be that the replacement of apartment buildings with terraces of houses would inevitably be significantly different for the plots in question. If we look now at preparing a fresh landscape and ecology management plan under condition 23, the uncertainty would be prolonged because a new ecological baseline will have to be established. The ecological surveys would have to be widened to include red kites and Scots pines, and your officers need to understand that because they are still working on the 2017 baselines. The results of the new surveys under condition 23 would have to be subject to public consultation. The Save Me Trust, who would be the landowner, would have to agree that it could provide the required net gain. And the eventual development would have, in the words of the condition, to be carried out fully in accordance with the approved new landscape and ecology management plan, thereby negating any previously approved details with conflict with that plan. You need, with respect, to make clear-cut decisions now that the amended scheme, which is all that's being reported to you tonight,
Less than 1 minute left.
is out of time, and that the original scheme is unacceptable. It has been abandoned by the applicants, and therefore you should refuse it tonight, and that would end this saga. Thank you, Chair. I'm willing to answer any questions on the legal points.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. MacDonald. The committee will be asking you questions on the planning point, and I will ask our officers to come back on any other points there. So, members, do you have any questions of a planning nature for the Speaker? No. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. MacDonald. And now it's Mrs. Holt, I believe. Good evening, Mrs. Holt.
Good evening.
And as before, 4 minutes with a 1 minute warning, and the time will start whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I am a resident living in Heath Park Drive, and I have 2 key points to raise. The first is regarding the surface water drainage strategy, which I feel does not pay enough attention to the northwest boundary. We have a number of houses in Heath Park Drive that suffer with surface and groundwater flooding on occasion, ours included. The site levels also vary by up to 5 metres, east to west, on the development site, and the new rising sewer main is proposed to be routed through the trees to Chertsey Road. I'm concerned during construction of the site and sewer that more water will run off the land and increase our flooding. Moreover, the high water absorption capacity of such trees as they are felled cannot be immediately replaced with the equivalent water absorption measures. That will create even more risk to our homes in the short term. My second point is about the environment. I am pleased to see that the case officer has proposed a refusal of condition 23. Never has there been a moment in our history with declarations from our national and local government that we are living in a climate crisis. Sustainability and biodiversity lie at the heart of our survival and should pervade every decision we make. An Excel spreadsheet purports to show that there is a net biodiversity gain for this development. This tick box exercise is flawed logic. It is fundamentally unsustainable owing to the destruction of the mature woodland and displacement of precious wildlife, and its replacement with immature and different species. The Scots pine woodland, containing trees up to 120 years old, has been left to mature for the past 50 years and is thriving with wildlife that naturally chooses and selects its best habitat within. Red kites, a protected species, are nesting and successfully breeding within the proposed site. They did not naturally select the area of proposed alternative woodland near Chertsey Road. The Environment Plan quotes, taking action to recover threatened, iconic or economically important species of animals, plants and fungi, and where possible, to prevent human-induced extinction or loss of known threatened species in England. It seems to me that by granting this application without the full knowledge of the red kites within the site, it is a direct contradiction of the plan and the law with regards to protected species. The creation of the Sangs habitat to accommodate some of the badgers without a natural and safe passage to it is also flawed. A sign to road users is considered an adequate offering of safe passage to badgers, whereas Surrey Wildlife Trust has called for a tunnel under the road. The Scots pine, whose importance is elevated by the climate emergency, plays a critical role in the store of carbon. There is also carbon release from the felled trees to be considered. The felling of such a large volume of trees is contrary to the Environment Plan and the COP26 pledges. I believe we will see a short, medium and long-term significant real-life loss in biodiversity. In conclusion, I urge you all as people in positions of responsibility to go against the case officer's proposal and refuse this reserved matters application. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mrs. Holt. Members, do you have any questions of a planning nature for the Speaker? No. Thank you very much indeed. And now, Mrs. Jackson, I believe. Yes, hello, Mrs. Jackson. I can see you there. And again, your 4 minutes, 1 minute warning, and the time will start whenever you're ready. Can you just wait a second till I get you on the screen? Right, I can see you now. I think we can all see you. So whenever you're ready, thank you.
Good evening, councillors. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. I have been working with Charles Church and Vestal Development Limited on this development since 2015, and therefore I was involved in the planning inquiry which led to the outline consent being granted. Since this time, I have sought to work with a well-established consultant team to pull together the principles established by the outline consent into the reserved matters application that is before you this evening. Firstly, I want to clarify that the application was submitted within the time set by condition 2 of the outline consent. This condition required the application, not the approval of reserved matters, to be submitted no later than 3 years from the date of the permission. The inspector's decision letter is dated the 26th of July 2017, which meant that the application for reserved matters had to be made by the 26th of July 2020. Our reserved matters application was submitted on the 17th of March 2020 and validated on the 19th of May 2020. These dates are within the 3-year deadline stipulated by the outline consent. Bear with me. With regard to comments made in relation to, in regards to the position presented by third parties that the amendments submitted during the course of the planning application, it is a well-established and accepted planning principle that an application can address comments received in response to the consultation process and that our application is subjected to. This often results in amended and supplementary plans and documents being submitted. In this case, the amendments were either design-led following a design panel review, which your authority embeds into the planning application process, or sought to provide information or clarification requested by statutory consultees. It is quite right and fair that your officers did accept them as responding to consultee comments, and is a fundamental part of the planning process. Importantly, in this instance, the amendments made did not materially alter the scheme proposed. The red line remained as originally submitted, and the parameters established by the outline consent have been fully adhered to. Turning to the scheme itself, our proposals represent not only an appropriate development for the site, but will deliver a truly beautiful development. Houses will be set within a retained woodland setting in distinct clusters dominated by green space and significant tree planting. Ample parking is provided and set off-street to ensure that the landscape credentials of the site are the dominating factor, not the built form. A central green open space will provide something of a woodland glade where residents can socialise, undertake recreation activities and children can safely play. A new community hall is being provided, which will be made available to a local organisation. 40% of the new dwellings will be affordable, providing much needed family homes in an area where supply is limited. The significant areas of retained woodland, which includes areas that contain the badger sets, will be legally transferred to the Save Me Trust so that they can be managed and maintained in perpetuity. A large sang is provided, which will provide a new and open space window. It has been designed to provide an attractive and safe natural environment for all residents of the village. It will maintain its current open character, but will be truly accessible for all. Updated ecology surveys will be undertaken this ecology season to ensure that the landscape ecological management plan can be fully discharged in accordance with condition 23. The landscape ecological management plan is really to secure the management and mitigation of ecological features, not to re-establish a baseline position. In terms of a surface water strategy, we are not seeking to discharge those details as part of this reserve matters. Clearly, we need to undertake baseline work, which we cannot do until the trees have been removed from the site, which requires the reserve matters application being granted. In summary, this proposed development will make an important contribution towards housing in the borough in a location that has been determined to be both sustainable and suitable for development. These are not factors that can be reopened for discussion. It is therefore considered that the proposed development is appropriate for the site and its surroundings, and as such, I do urge you to support your officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, do you have any questions of planning nature for the Speaker? No. Thank you very much indeed, Mrs. Jackson. To the officers. Mrs. Bishop, do you want to comment on anything that's been raised in presentations?
Yes, please. As I have already said, as far as we are concerned, the application was made within the timeframe required by the appeal decision, and we remain of that view. With regard to the 4 reasons that were the application was refused on, the council only responded on the safeguarding of land. The other reasons were followed up by the Heath Park Wood group. But notwithstanding that, the inspector was clear. The development on this site is acceptable. You have a permission in place for residential development with sang and a community building. If I go back to what I think Mrs. Holt was saying about biodiversity, if you will bear with me 1 minute, I just want to read you something from the appeal decision, just so I think it would bring some clarity to this, and then I'll talk to you about biodiversity net gain as well. The inspector in his decision said, Section 40 of the Natural Environment and Rural Communities Act 2006 imposes a duty on any English public authority to have regard in the exercise of its functions to the purpose of conserving biodiversity. The proposed development would lead to the loss of about 5 hectares of the existing woodland north of Woodlands Lane. That area consists principally of mature plantation conifers, although some younger native deciduous trees, including birch, sweet chestnut, oak and beech, have established themselves particularly in gaps where conifers have fallen. The understory here is dominated by tall bracken with clumps of holly and of invasive non-native species such as rhododendron and laurel. Ground flora is very limited in its diversity. This is an environment of low biodiversity value, not a site having the potential to contain a unique and rare insect, fern, moss and fungal species assemblage, as Dr. Berardi described it, albeit without the benefit of a prior site visit. Any loss of biodiversity resulting from the loss of this woodland area would be more than compensated for by the proposed enhancements to the retained woodland areas surrounding the proposed development, and by the new planting and landscaping that is proposed for the Sang and the development area itself. So the inspector has made some very clear parameters on tree loss and biodiversity. Mrs. Holt was referring to the biodiversity net gain as a tick box exercise. This is not an application for planning permission. So the provisions that came in last year under the Environment Bill, where they talk about doing a biodiversity net gain and using the metric 3, which is what the applicant has used, although they don't have to submit it for this, has demonstrated that there is a biodiversity net gain, whilst recognising that there is the loss of the woodland. There is an impact on that. But the loss of the woodland is established. So the residential development in that area is approved. With regard to the points about the drainage, this will be dealt with under condition 8. It is a pre-commencement condition. Now, as part of that condition, which is imposed by the inspector, they will have to do further works on levels. So although we are considering levels this evening, that may change following the works that they will have to do to sort out the drainage levels on this site, because until they clear, they will not know what they have. So again, this will be subject of consultation with the residents, with all the residents along that boundary with Heath Park Wood, Heath Park Drive, so that they will have the opportunity to comment on their experiences of drainage based on what the applicant is then proposing, and the such strategy that will be then forthcoming from that. It will also give the opportunity for the lead local flood authority to comment, and also for our own drainage engineer to comment. So we are satisfied that we will make sure that in the event that reserve matters are approved, that all of the requisite conditions are complied with, and we have all the relevant information to ensure satisfactory development. With regard to the question of red kites, we have consulted Natural England on this, and you will see from the report, they have no objection to the proposal in this regard. Going back to Mr. McDonald's point about the scheme, if I can just go to the housing layout, if I could for that. The areas that we had the changes were here. This is where the flat block was here and here. In terms of the overall scheme of the development, we also had the road, I think, stopped here and now comes round in a loop. When we're looking at whether or not we accept amendments, we look at the materiality of them. And that is a planning judgment that is made. And in our view, those changes did not materially alter the residential development that was being proposed. The development area for residential development remains to the north of Woodlands Lane. The Sang hasn't changed. The retained woodland to the north hasn't changed. The ecological area has not changed. So the changes were within the scheme, and in our view did not materially alter the original proposal when we were looking at the proposed changes. It is not uncommon when you have changes to layout for all the documents have to change with it. It just so happens that because this application had a lot of conditions applications with it, rather than just coming straight in for the 4 reserve matters, it had a knock-on effect. And that is why it would seem that lots of changes, but it's just to be consistent throughout the document suite. As you will note, condition 23 has been withdrawn. I don't think there is anything else at the moment I would like to raise. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Bishop. Can I just clarify on that last point? Condition 23 was withdrawn following conversations between you and the applicant as against any other device, if you like, for better word.
What happened was the applicant saw the report and they agreed to do the surveys. So on that basis, the submission for condition 23 was withdrawn. and the informative 19 was also removed from the report.
Thank you. And can I just draw, been pointed out to me, Mrs. Bishop talked about condition, well, I've lost my notes already, I've been scribbling things out. The condition 8 on the, was actually on page 74 of the inspector's report, if you were, and that related to the surface water treatment, which picks up the comment from Mrs. Holt. So I just thought bring that to your attention on that one. I think that's covered all the outstanding points that I've got now. Is the other points. So I'll open that to Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. It's just actually going back on the variation of condition 4 around the preparation of the northern side, the top side of it, that bit there, that for 60 houses. I have to say I've got concerns about that, and I wonder if maybe we could put an amendment in there to say that it should be 60 hours or within 12 months of the first occupancy, because there is a risk that they could stop at 59 and leave the site with a trench dug for quite some period of time. And although I appreciate there is sangs across the road, there is no crossing across that road. It's a straight piece of road, and I would not, with a small child, want to cross there regularly. So I wonder if that amendment could be made to that condition. And then going...
Can you just clarify, what amendment are you seeking?
So I am seeking amendment. The applicants have asked for an amendment. Ours was before the first occupation of any dwelling on the site. It should be completed. They've asked for 60 houses, and I'm asking for 60 hours or within 12 months of the first occupancy, whichever is the sooner.
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. And then going on to really, I don't think there's a single one of us that wants to see a development on this site. I think all of us feel very passionately that there is undoubtedly a loss. My understanding, and I'd like to clarify it, is that's not being decided. If we were to refuse the reserved matters at this stage, presumably the applicant would go to appeal on that refusal. So it would come down to what reasonable grounds we've got to refuse it. And that, for me, comes down to two main points. One is whether or not it was accepted within time. And then the other one is whether or not the alterations that are being proposed consider material alterations. And both of those, unfortunately, are fairly subjective. And there's obviously two very different opinions on the matter. So I wonder if you could, just for the benefit of the committee, just one more time, give an explanation of what a material amendment is, so that we could understand that the net difference, if you like, on this application for that, and also going back on that within time. Presumably, all of the reserved matters would have to be submitted by July 2023, because that's in relation to the first thing. So that's the first point. So at what point do we have to have this done and dusted by in order for this application to be succinct? So, whatever the word is, you know what I mean. Again, to pick back up on the material alteration and the within time. And then the only other point that I'd like to come back on is the tunnel under the road for the badgers. So if there is a recommendation for a tunnel under the road and we're accepting a sign that I'm assuming the badgers can't read and drivers won't, then if we could just come back on those points for me, please, just for a little bit of clarity. Thank you.
I think there's one other question you possibly meant to raise but didn't have the chance, was that the further reserved matters coming back to this committee. Was that your final point? Can I raise that for you now? Thank you. So reserved matters come back. Yeah, can we just say that reserved matters would come back, the remaining reserved matters come back to this committee for consideration. I'm sure it would do, but we just underline that. Thank you.
The reserved matters that we're being asked to consider tonight are scale, design, landscaping and layout. So if you're looking to refuse it, those are the 4 reasons, those are the 4 areas you're looking to refuse it on. If there is an issue about us accepting something in time or material alterations, that is normally within the realms of a legal challenge. Is that right, Will? If they're saying that basically are about whether things are accepted in time or their material, that wouldn't be a refusal of the reserved matters. That would be a question of process.
A judicial review application could be made on that basis that it was ultra vires, and yeah, an unlawful decision because it was out of time.
But in terms of the reserved matters of scale, that wouldn't constitute a reason for refusal of the reserved matters.
Sorry, say that again, Sarita.
So on the basis of reserved matters of scale, layout, landscaping and design, it would be unreasonable to refuse planning permission, or it would be unreasonable to refuse reserved matters approval on the grounds that it wasn't accepted in time or was accepted in time, or material alterations, because those are matters that would fall under the JR provision rather than the planning inspectorate.
Yes, so if the decision was approved, a judicial review application could be made if they thought that decision was incorrect.
Sorry, can I just come in, just for clarification? As a committee, I'm going to turn this on the head because we normally go from the other way. As a committee, we are looking at the officer recommendation and not other matters outside the jurisprudence of this committee. So the legality or otherwise is not for us to consider. We can only consider the reserved matters application that is in front of us. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
That was a yes.
If the decision was made and the decision is out of time, then it would be open to a judicial review application on the basis that the decision was incorrect and illegal.
Councillor Wheeler, go on.
I was going to say, I think we need a little bit of extra further clarity on that, please. Can we, as a committee, deem that, in our opinion, these reserved matters are out of time to come forward?
I'm of the opinion, as a planning officer, that the committee cannot refuse on those grounds. You can only refuse with respect of the issues of the reserved matters that Sarita has already read out. So issues of landscaping, issues of the detailed design of the scheme.
Can we have an informative on our decision that the decision of the committee and the voting on the reserved matters is based expressly on the legal guidance that we are given, that we cannot refuse this matter on it being out of time? So there is absolute clarity on that and the decision of this committee.
I think an informative in some respects stating that the application is not out of time would be somewhat superfluous, because we as a planning authority would not have considered that in the first place and brought it forward to you. We as a planning authority, when the application came in, if we felt the reserved matters was out of time, we would have informed the applicants of that at that point of time. If you put an informative down, all it is doing is repeating that the inspector's decision was made on X date and the application was submitted within time. So it seems somewhat superfluous exercise.
Yeah, I come back to my point that we as a committee can opine on the application in front of us. Councillor Mansfield, you indicated you were speaking. Have you got a further view on this point?
Okay, yeah, my point is this. I've listened to the both sides, listened to what Councillor Wheeler said. I've listened to what the officer and also what Mr Partington has said. And I think we're getting into a very different area. I agree, we have to make the decision based on the circumstances of the application that we have before us. That's how this committee has always worked. But however, on this situation, and we've discussed things I think of a legal nature, my advice would be actually we defer this application for further clarification of the legal situation, because clearly something's come into this application tonight that you can question whether it should have come into the discussions, and that's another issue. But I think given what has been discussed and what's been stated, that this should be deferred with on the basis of requesting further clarification as regards the dates for this matter. And therefore, I certainly don't wish to take any further part in this planning application. I think it's in error.
Mrs Bishop, are you coming? We're coming back to where we were. Thank you.
My original slide. The outline permission was granted on the 26th of July 2017. I draw your attention to page 74 in your agenda, and it says condition 1. Details of the appearance, landscaping, layout and scale should be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority before any development takes place, and the development shall be carried out as approved. Condition 2. Application for approval of the reserved matters shall be made to the local planning authority not later than 3 years from the date of this permission. The reserved matters application that you have before you was valid from the 19th of May 2020. It is within the 3 years stipulated by the inspector's decision. That is a matter of fact.
Thank you, Mr Bishop. That underlines my view that we as a planning committee should be examining the papers in front of us with the officer recommendation as amended. Councillor Mansfield, did you say you needed to leave by now, or are you going to stay on the rest of the meeting?
No, I actually have to get a train, so I apologise. Thank you.
Thank you for your involvement. Thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
Sorry, it was just to come back on the badger point.
Right, your underground badgers.
With regard to the badgers, I would refer you to page 62 in the inspector's decision. And it says, because the resident badgers group territory already includes the area to the south of Woodlands Lane, it is unlikely that badger movements across the lane would increase substantially. The 20-mile-per-hour speed limit, no parking zones and warning signs that are proposed as part of the mitigation measures would help to reduce the potential for badger road deaths. As badgers are nocturnal, it is unlikely that public use of the Sang would lead to conflict with people or dogs. Following on from that, and that's in the inspector's decision, so that was already established, those parameters. Then following on from that, we have also the badger tunnel wasn't proportionate given the previous comments from the inspector. So following on from that, we are just reinforcing the signage to make sure that it gets done before there's any likelihood of the badgers crossing.
The signage goes up before the work
commences? Yeah, before the bund, I think. It's related to the bund, if memory serves me right. Because that's the thing that would attract them across the road.
Is there a risk that the development will encourage them across the road rather than the building of the bund? So again, can we have the signage up from the beginning of the development? Is that reasonable?
It's, the condition 17 says within 1 month of the commencement of the works to create the bunds. So before the bunds are actually there. So once they start working, the signage, it says within 1 month of the commencement of the works to create the bunds within the proposed sang, details of advance warning signage to be displayed on Woodlands Lane to advise highway users of the present suburb shall be submitted. Once approved, the sign shall be displayed before the bunds are completed, because that's the thing that's likely to attract the badgers.
I appreciate that's the thing that's going to attract them. But for example, I'm not a great lover of noise, and I may decide to move if my neighbours were making lots of noise, which by the commencement of the development, given... So where is the bund created in relation to the work commencing on the site? So does the bund happen first, or does the work on site happen first? Because it would be nice if the trigger could be the first of those events.
In my view, the works to the trees would start first, but the ecological retained area is subject to a badger method statement that the West Surrey Badger Group are satisfied with. So the badgers would be protected, but if there is a separate trigger in terms of condition 17, I don't have...
I was going to say, is there any reason not to have it from the commencement, given that they may well be displaced by that?
I have no problem with that.
I feel that we should be asking for that. I can see nobody going against that view, so I think this is something we would be asking for, Mrs. Bishop. Thank you. Sorry, members, we've got any other points? Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. I think all of us are very concerned about the loss of trees from the area which is going to be developed. I think that's the reason why we had a TPO order put in place covering this land at a previous planning meeting not so long ago, to make sure that where woodland is being removed, that it is done in appropriate circumstances and that appropriate replacement of those trees will take place, not only in respect of the government's wishes that we plant more trees, but that it's actually in our local plan now that where woodland is removed for these purposes, it shall be replaced with a number of trees at least equal to those removed, and preferably more than the number of trees that are removed. And now, of course, in this particular case, it's going to happen in the Sangs across the road. And if we look at page 98, if we can get that up on the screen, is it possible for us to put the plan, the aerial view of the proposed Sangs up on the screen? That's it, you've just gone past it. Next one. That's it, that's the one. It's a great shame that in our presentation here we didn't have a copy of the satellite view from Google Maps of what this land looks like today. The word barren comes to mind. It is pretty much deserted of all wildlife apart from a few trees across the middle between the existing development to the left of the screen there, and to the right where the road, just before it crosses the motorway on the bridge. That's virtually all there is at the present moment. The land below that appears to be hay meadow. I don't know whether it's actually being used at the present moment for producing silage. It may well be that's what it looks like at the present moment. But it's certainly barren of all of what you might call biodiversity at the present moment. So it's good to see there that in this proposal, as indicated by this particular plan here, that there are a substantial number of trees going to be put where there are no trees whatsoever at the present time. And in fact, the Sangs is quite an attractive proposition in my eyes. My question is, and bearing in mind that a mature tree were replaced by, well, it's probably going to, calling it an immature, I'm sort of thinking of something slightly more than a sapling, maybe 10 years growth in it already before it's planted. Takes another 30 years before it will develop to have the same environmental benefits of the tree that it replaced. Now we're in 2022, 30 years takes us to 2052, which is beyond the government's target date for meeting its CO2 targets. So anything that we can do in order to help this development not be too detrimental to that, achieving that target, would imply that the Sangs must be planted with more trees than are being taken out from the development itself. And I wonder if we could make it an informative of some sort within this, that be the case, that they give some guarantees that more trees are planted to make up for the deficiency of the 30 years before they will achieve the maturity that will be required to replace the effectiveness of the trees that they are intended to replace. That's my first question.
Sorry, can I just come back on that one?
Yep, sure.
You had me slightly confused because I believed one of the shots from Mrs. Bishop showed the rather barren field with
I don't remember seeing it.
But be as it may, you are on, I think, on condition 23, which is being held over for further discussions. And I think maybe Mrs. Bishop will take note of the not unreasonable request that there are more. And should I say, can there be such thing as the right kind of tree?
Yes.
We need to see, because, you know, as the years go by, there's a different view on trees. I always thought that silver birch was a weed, you know, but now suddenly it's become the saviour of all mankind. I still think it's a weed, but be as it may. But yeah, I think that's right, that we need to see the management plan containing the number of trees and the appropriate trees for its location and recognising the carbon capture that we're all looking for. I'll come back to you, Councillor Reid, because I think Councillor Tapp had another point, did you?
Yes, I did, actually. On the question of biodiversity, all I've been hearing about tonight is flora. I've heard nothing about fauna at all. If we have the right flora, then we should have the right fauna. Trees alone are not the answer. Trees are very limited. In the woodlands at the present moment, there will be damp environments which will encourage the sort of things. Maybe be frogs and toads in there. And certainly that sort of thing, that sort of fauna, I think is unlikely to transfer its habitat to the new Sang, laid out as it presently is. I think we've got an opportunity here that's been missed in terms of what I see in front of me, the plan, that the one big thing that is missing from this design that they've got from the Sangs there is any form of pond or lake. And if there is anything more likely to attract diversity in terms of fauna, it is a pond or a lake. It will attract frogs, toads, maybe even voles, that's a possibility. Certainly wildlife birds, waterborne birds, which are clearly totally missing from the present moment. So if we want to expand the diversity of the biodiversity as a result of this development, by developing the sangs as not even just equivalent to what's been it's replacing, but better than what it's replacing, I would like to see some sort of informative making a recommendation that the sang includes some sort of water feature, maybe a 30-metre diameter lake or pond or something like that, suitably planted with reeds or whatever to encourage a greater diversity of fauna in that location and attract them to that area and everything that relies upon that as well, if the committee is so minded. Thank you, Chair.
I think maybe rather than demand, it would be, were possible, and part of the management plan, that this would be included. I mean, Countryfile was a very interesting article on hedgerows, which don't look at me like that.
Just one other comment, maybe, if they are going to dig out a lake, the bunds, which will be running along the edge of the motorway, is a very suitable place to use that soil. They don't even have to dispose of it off-site. Thank you.
Right, we are moving off the subject, but thank you, Councillor Tapper. Councillor White.
My concerns are to do with the sang as well. All the plans look really nice, but what we need is a guarantee for Persimmon that it's going to be done before residents move in, and that the extravagant sangs that's going to be put there is not going to be paid for by the residents, because we all know about the debacle at Earlswood Park, and 10 years on, they are still not happy with the sangs there. So I would just like a guarantee that the sangs is in place and functional before the residents are asked to pay for the maintenance of it.
Yes, Mrs Bishop, there are a couple of points there.
If I start with Councillor White's question first, because that's simpler to answer. The short answer to your question is yes. The Section 106 agreement that is attributed to the outline permission secures the outline, its maintenance and its management. Ultimately, that will form part of the management company that will go to residents, but that will be for residents to decide if they want to, if that's something that they want to buy into when they buy the property, in terms of an expense to them. That's established by the outline permission and what the Section 106 that was agreed by the inspector. With regard to the sang, it has to be in place before anything is occupied on the site. That is the requirement, because otherwise it's not doing its job. The job of a sang is to mitigate its impact on the Thames, recreational impact on the Thames Basin Heath Special Protection Area. That's its purpose. And following on from that, that's why I go back to Councillor Tapper's point. The purpose of the sang is to mitigate the impact on the SPA. Any change to the sang in terms of how it functions would have to be agreed with Natural England, because its primary purpose is ironically not biodiversity per se, but it is to mitigate its recreational impact. With regard to the question of the TPO, the reason it was imposed was at that time there was nothing to stop anybody going into the site to cut the trees down. It wasn't because with the outline and the reserve matters, the council retains control. The issue is that if nothing was implemented, somebody could have gone in and chopped the lot down, subject to anything the Forestry Commission had to say, and we would have no control. So that's why it was put in there as a precaution, so that everybody was aware that they could not remove any of those trees unless they came to the council with their proposals.
So thank you for that. Councillor Wheeler.
Last point, I promise. Just with reference to a point that Councillor Tapper made about an aerial view, if you're going to take in an aerial view of one side of the road, you need to take in an aerial view of the other side of the road, which is densely wooded, which it won't be following this application. So there's a balance with aerial views to consider. The other, just one point to come back on, is the community building. Who is responsible for the upkeep of it? Because I appreciate you said that it would be given to a community organisation, but is there a community organisation in mind? Has somebody undertaken to take it? And could it be there as a sort of a building falling into disrepair?
Who owns the building is a matter for the applicant. The planning purpose is to get the building there and open to the public. But saying that, I am aware that they are talking to various local groups.
Okay, members, we've been down the Badger route. We've done most other things. We've got ponds and newts. Are there any other points? Councillor Lewis?
Sorry, it's just another bit of clarification, because I note you call it coniferous plantation woodland. Well, a plantation to me would indicate it's farmed. So is that therefore it's an unnatural woodland? And does it qualify to be replaced? It's just curiosity. Thank you.
I would refer back to the inspector's decision at paragraph 96, page 62. That area consists principally of mature plantation conifers. There was a lot of discussion about the nature of the woodland and whether it was a crop. And that was discussed at great deal at the appeal. And the inspector came to the view that the loss of the woodland, bearing in mind all the other material considerations, was acceptable.
Thank you. Right, members, can I just remind you, we are here tonight to consider the matter in relation to the first part of the proposal, the appearance, landscaping, layout and scale. Those are the items that we are looking at, and then the submission of details as go on with amendments as outlined by Mrs. Bishop and as subsequently agreed. We have discussed this at length. I'm going to call this to a close. Can I have a proposer and a seconder for the recommendation to grant in relation to the appearance, landscaping, layout and scale of this site? Councillor Perry and Councillor Betton, all those in agreement? Mr. Scott will read out names, please. Thank you, Mr. Scott.
Voting in favour of that recommendation. Graham, were you? Members, can you have your hands up?
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Sorry.
Those are councillors Alloway, Barnett, Betton, Black.
Against?
And
Councillor Whitcroft, are you voting against? Yeah.
voting against, Councillor Whitcroft.
Abstain?
Abstaining, Councillor White and Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, members. That has been passed. That is the end of this agenda. Thank you, members of the public and the speakers. Thank you, all those on YouTube. I don't know if there's anybody, I can't